And the last of these mandated programs in the federal government, which take up 81% of our overall budget today and mandated, again, have to pay for it, is Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is simply welfare health care, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show, but this is what we mean why Medicaid is another hard program to control the cost. How do you treat your rental car? Do you treat it as well as your car? Probably not. Or maybe you've been in a hotel lately. You probably use more than one towel. The reason is simple. You don't own it. You don't have to get an oil change for your car. Or for that matter, you don't have to do the laundry for all the towels you use at the hotel. It's the same thing with Medicaid. When people don't directly pay for something, they don't respect it as much. And that's why Medicaid and other programs, when you don't know the cost, will grow radically out of control. And why we have some silly analogies, sure, but it's to show you that when it's yours, when it's truly owned by you, you treat it with much more respect than when it's handed to you or you never see the bill. So what's happening here in the Sunshine State, where so many of us look for new opportunities? Well, the good news is this. We're the only state in the union that had a balanced budget last year without raising taxes or fees. And while Washington, D.C. saw its bond rating degrade, here in Florida, our bond rating was actually upgraded. It's still AAA, but just a few months ago it was negative. Now it's seen as stable because we have balanced the budget without raising taxes. And the good news is as well, the unemployment rate, which is as high as 12% last December, has trickled down a bit to 10.3%. But these are still very unsteady numbers. We're very concerned about, will the new jobs come to Florida? But the good news is we're competing very well with other states. California, Texas, let alone New York, have massive budget shortfalls and are experiencing major tax increases and increased regulatory burdens in contrast to Florida. And in a candid way, if you want to look tall, hang out with short people. And right now, our other big states, California, Texas, and New York, they look pretty small right now. And so in comparison, so when businesses are thinking, where do I start that business? Where do I expand the business? Florida looks very stable in contrast with the other big states. But it doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet. Now, where are we in Florida? Well, to give you a little contrast where we are, just a few years ago, we had mentioned that number 2006, very low unemployment rate of roughly 3%. Since then, our unemployment rate has grown to over 10%. But in also budgetary terms, what does it mean? At the height of the economy, $74 billion is being spent by the state of Florida. Today, we've actually reduced the amount of overall spending to around $69 billion. That's $5 billion less, and yes, that's a big number. And you might say, well, of course, the government could just simply tighten its belt. Well, let me give you an idea of what the state expected to have to spend here in 2011, 2012. If we'd stayed on the same trajectory as 2006, we'd have $85 billion to spend. So instead of $85 billion to spend, we're going to have roughly $69 billion. That'll put a lot of pressure on education, on health care, let alone transportation, maybe economic development. And that means fewer dollars are where we want to put the money. So this is the reality that we're going to face. And the only way out of this is not just cutting budgets, but we have to find ways to grow the economy. And all we have to offer right now is a lot of stability. Again, the AAA bond rating, good news. The fact that we did not raise taxes, good news. But we still need to have that economic class that creates the jobs and the opportunities, that being, of course, the entrepreneurs gaining that access to money. And that's why we want to stress today why it's so important that the government borrow less, so that you, the entrepreneur, can borrow more at lower rates so that you can afford to pay those back and, more importantly, hire people and get this economy moving once again. And so that's why the state of Florida has made a conscious decision to spend less so that you keep more in your pocket. The candid truth is what America is all about is that we believe that the individual will make better decisions than the government. It's the reason why we fought the Cold War and won. Let's start acting like we actually won the Cold War. That is the philosophy we've taken. Yes, it means some tough decisions with education and healthcare, but we really believe that we keep more money in your pocket, that you'll spend it in a much smarter way than when a person sends it up to Tallahassee, let alone Washington, D.C. That's the philosophical choice we're making, and we believe that empowers you, the individual, as opposed to a big government bureaucracy. So where are your tax dollars going? That's what people always ask me. Where's the money that I pay in sales taxes? Where does the money in property tax? Where does all that money go? I'm spending so much more than I used to spend, and where's that going? Well, let me give you a couple ideas of what's happening first on the state level. You'd be shocked to know that 1 out of every $3 that goes up to Tallahassee goes to Medicaid. welfare, health care. And if you ask any doctor, if you ask any hospital administrator, most importantly, if you ask someone on Medicaid, they'll tell you it's not a very good system. And yet, it takes 1 out of every $3 in Tallahassee. And that's why we've got to move in a new direction, because candidly, as I talked about just earlier in the show, when people don't have direct say on an issue, they don't care about it. People on Medicaid don't pay for their health care. So if they go to the emergency room or their doctor's office, they never pay out of pocket. So they don't care about the cost. In other words, it's a rental car. Or in other words, they don't care how many towels they're going to use. That's why we're attacking this issue like no other. Because this should be about quality standards. Because when you save money here, the people who are paying for it in a private sector, for their HMO or PPO, their costs will go down. Because the little secret about Medicaid, despite being a little bit of a one person doesn't pay it, another person does, is this. When the government reimburses that doctor, when the government reimburses that hospital, it doesn't truly cover the cost. So everyone who pays for their private insurance, guess what? Your insurance cost is artificially higher because the government doesn't pay what it truly costs, and they cost shift over to you. So when people ask me about where's my money going, what about my property taxes? Where does all that money go? Well, what you might or might not know is that a few years ago we had a big fight, 2007, 2008, in finally reforming some of our property tax issues. It placed a limit on the increases in property taxes and finally said you can actually move around your Saver Homes provisions. But what it means to you is this. In a 5-year time period prior to passing that constitutional amendment, which you approved in January of 2008 with over 60% of the vote to change the Constitution, what had happened in the previous 5 years? Local property tax revenues increased by about 100%. I'm right. I'm not kidding. 100%. And they had twice as much money than they did 5 years previous. And people said, this is just too much. And remember, you're paying that property tax whether you sold the house or not. You're paying property taxes on the value at that time period. Clearly, in the last few years, the value of your home has gone down big time, but a lot of people have not truly felt the reduction in their property taxes. And that's why people are struggling and frustrated by a government that is spending too much, twice as much as that it had just a few years ago. So the final analysis on property taxes is you like to think you own your home. You're renting your home from the government, because when you have to pay property taxes higher and higher every year, it means that when you can't make that property taxes, guess who'll own your home when it's all said and done? You know, one of the things I get the most calls about, welfare drug testing. Now again, let's be clear with what welfare is. Welfare is you don't work, yet you get a check in the mail every month from other taxpayers. Well, we came up with a very simple thought here in Florida. If you're going to get a check paid for by others, you better be ready to work and help your family out. So make sure you're truly ready to work. We're going to require welfare recipients to get a drug test. They got to pass that test. They got to prove they're ready to work. Now, some people consider us mean-spirited. I'll tell you what, I believe in truly leading by example. And so as a father of 3, what happens with my kids? Sometimes they listen to me, but they always watch what I do. So think about it. A welfare recipient with kids, they don't go to work, yet they get a paycheck every month. What is that child going to learn? I don't have to work to get a paycheck. By requiring that drug test, we're sending the right message to the kids that their parents are not going to be on their drugs, and they're going to make sure they're truly ready to work. So when this economy turns around, they can go back and provide for their families, and their kids will learn that earning that paycheck is a lot better than simply getting one in the mail. But to hammer the point even more, we're not helping anybody if our people are using their welfare dollars paid for by someone else to buy drugs. You know, in my position now, I get shown a lot of editorials, and candidly, a lot of them are just simply off base, and maybe we'll use the politically incorrect term as stupid. Let me give you an example of a stupid editorial. Right now, we've been talking so much about how difficult it is to balance this budget, not raise taxes, trying to make an environment that's friendly to business so people actually want to live here and work here. Well, recently, the Orlando Sentinel actually came out against our private prison plan. Let me just make this really clear. If we move in this direction, we'll save as a state at least $22 million. That will free up $22 million we're currently spending in prisons, and instead can use it for roads, or better, in my opinion, schools. And yet the Orlando Sentinel thought it'd be better to take care of the prisons more than our schools. I would deem that as a stupid editorial. One of the reasons why I found some success in life is that I listen more than I talk. My dad always said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use those in proportion, and you'll be all right. And I think the same thing holds true for not just elected officials, but moms and dads and bosses alike. So the best way we can help you on this show is for you to send us your comments and your questions. Because when I'm talking, I don't learn anything new. So go to our Facebook page, post what's on your mind, or send us an email of the questions you would like answered. That's how we turn around America. We ask the tough questions and give you the answers so you make that informed decision. So join us on Facebook and let your voice be heard so we can turn around Florida, turn around America, and provide those opportunities that each of us have been blessed with.